Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Brunswick, Maine. My name is David Q and I'm a member of our Board of Trustees. Today's service will be led by our interim minister, the Reverend Justine Sullivan. The topic will be All Souls Day. After the service, please join us for our virtual coffee hour.
This morning, we call to us those we have loved and lost. Humans, cats, dogs, other creatures, other beings who have loved us, who have shared our troubles and our triumphs, who have kept us warm, made us smile, perhaps infuriated us at times, all a part of being in relationship. And we miss those who have gone on to whatever is next, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, back to stardust. We welcome their memory into our hearts and minds, into this space. Come, let us be together in worship, and in honor of All Souls Day, let us sing together our opening hymn, number 203, For All the Saints.
For all the saints who from their labors rest, who there by faith before the world confess, thy name most strong, and hearts are brave again, and arms are strong. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Cry Heart But Never Break by Glenn Ringvad, translated from the Danish by Robert Multhorpe.
In the far north, in a small, snug house, 4 children lived with their beloved grandmother. A kindly woman, she had cared for them for many years. Now she had a visitor. Not wishing to frighten the children, the visitor had left his scythe outside the door. All the same, they knew it was death.
Nels, the oldest, and his sister Sonia closed their eyes, heavy with sorrow. Casper, who was younger, tried to ignore the visitor, but Leah, the youngest, who was always getting into trouble, stared straight at death. In the quiet, the children could hear their grandmother upstairs, breathing with the same raspy breaths as the figure at the table. They knew death had come for her, and the time was short.
Since everyone knows death's only friend is night, the children quickly made a plan. They would keep death away from their grandmother by giving him coffee all through the night. At dawn, he would have no choice but to leave without her. So every time death emptied his cups, Nels would ask,
"More coffee, sir?"
and death would nod. Death loved his coffee, strong and black like the night, and he was happy to sit and rest for a while.
Time passed. Finally, Death was ready. He placed his bony hand over his cup to signal no more. Then Leah, who had been watching Death all night, reached out and took his hand.
"Oh, Death, our grandmother is so dear to us. Why does she have to die?"
Some people say Death's heart is dead and black as a piece of coal, but that's not true. Beneath his inky cloak, Death's heart is as red as most beautiful sunset and beats with a great love of life. Death wanted to help the children understand. So he said,
"I would like to tell you a story."
And in a strong, sweet voice, he began to speak.
Once upon a time, so long ago that only I can remember, there lived 2 brothers. One was called Sorrow, the other Grief. Woeful and sad, they moved up and down their gloomy valley. They went slowly and heavily, and because they never looked up, they never saw through the shadows to the tops of the hills. At the tops of those hills there lived 2 sisters, Joy and Delight. They were bright and sunny, and their days were full of happiness. The only shadow was their sense that something was missing. They didn't know what, but they felt they couldn't fully enjoy their happiness. I think you can guess what happened next. One day, the brothers and the sisters met. Sorrow fell instantly in love with Delight, and she with him. It was the same for Grief and Joy. Each couldn't live without the other. After their double wedding and a great celebration, the 2 couples moved into neighboring houses, halfway up and halfway down the hill. This way, the distance to their old homes was the same. They all lived to be very old. When the time came to die, Grief and Joy did so on the same day, as did Sorrow and Delight. Their happiness together had been so great that they couldn't live without each other.
"That's a good story,"
said Nels.
It is the same with life and death. What would life be worth if there were no death? Who would enjoy the sun if it never rained? Who would yearn for day if there were no night?
The children weren't sure they had understood Death fully, but somehow they knew he was right. At last, Death stood up. It was time to go upstairs. A line of pale gray was edging away the night. Caspar wanted to stop Death, but Nels held him back.
No,
Nels said.
life is moving on. This is how it must be.
Moments later, the children heard the upstairs window open. Then a voice somewhere between a cry and a whisper, Death said,
Fly, soul, fly, fly away.
The children hurried upstairs. They tiptoed into their grandmother's room. Grandmother had died. The curtains were blowing in the gentle morning breeze. Looking at the children, Death said quietly,
Cry, heart, but never break. Let your tears of grief and sadness help begin new life.
Then he was gone. Ever after, whenever the children opened a window, they would think of their grandmother. And when the breeze caressed their faces, they could feel her touch. In the years that followed, the children lived with their joy and their sorrow, but they always remembered Death's words and took great comfort from their hearts, which grieved and cried, but never broke.
Our meditation is by Walt Whitman. Election Day, November 1884. If I should need to name, O Western world, your powerfulest scene and show, 'twould not be you, Niagara, nor you, ye limitless prairies, nor your huge rifts of canyons, Colorado, nor you, Yosemite, nor Yellowstone with all its spasmic geyser loops ascending to the skies, appearing and disappearing, nor Oregon's white cones, nor Huron's belt of mighty lakes, nor Mississippi's stream. This seething hemisphere's humanity, as now I'd name the still small voice vibrating, America's choosing day. The heart of it, not in the chosen, the act itself the main, the quadrennial choosing. The stretch of north and south aroused, seaboard and inland, Texas to Maine, the prairie states, Vermont, Virginia, California, the final ballot shower from east to west, the paradox and conflict, the countless snowflakes falling, a swordless conflict, yet more than all Rome's wars of old, or modern Napoleon's, the peaceful choice of all. Or good or ill humanity, welcoming the darker odds, the dross, foams and ferments the wine, it serves to purify, while the heart pants life glows. These stormy gusts and winds waft precious ships, swelled Washington's, Jefferson's, Lincoln's sails. And now let us enter into a time of meditation and prayer. May there be peace. May there be peace in our hearts. May there be peace in our families, between our loved ones, among our neighbors. May there be peace across our country, in the towns and cities where people are casting ballots and where many will vote on Election Day. May there be peace, and may there be justice. May it be so. Amen. Blessed be. Ashe.
My mother, when love is gone, my mother, when love is gone, in our darkest hour hope lingers on. My father, when peace is gone, my father, when peace is gone, in our darkest hour hope lingers on.
Our reading this morning is a brief excerpt from A Wreath for Emmett Till by Marilyn Nelson. Emmett Till's name still catches in my throat, like syllables waylaid in a stutterer's mouth. A 14-year-old stutterer in the South to visit relatives and to be taught the family's ways. His mother had finally bought that White Sox cap. She'd made him swear an oath to be careful around white folks. She'd told him the truth of many a Mississippi anecdote. Some white folks have blind souls. In his suitcase, she'd packed dungarees, T-shirts, underwear, and comic books. She'd given him a note for the conductor, waved to his chubby face, wondered if he'd remember to brush his hair. Her only child, a body left to bloat. Here ends our reading.
Well, some people die for honor, and some people die for love. Some people die while singing to the heavens above. Some people die believing in the cross on Calvary Hill. And some people die in the blink of an eye for a $20 bill. Some people go out in glory with the wind at their backs. Some get to tell their own story, write their own epitaph. Sometimes you see it coming, sometimes you won't know until you run out of breath with a knee on your neck for a $20 bill. Oh, brother, I never knew now I never will. Oh, but brother, I'll make this promise to you. I'll remember you still. Well, now, let this be our communion. It's time to break the bread and do this in remembrance, like the good book said. And sometimes the wine is a sacrament, sometimes the blood is just spilled, and sometimes the love is the devil's last straw, the future unfulfilled, like the dream they killed. $20 bill.
I was thinking about that boy. That's what Rosa Parks said in an interview after she refused to give up her seat at the front of the bus. I was thinking about what they did to Emmett Till. Emmett Till was 14 years old, visiting family in Money, Mississippi, when a white woman accused him of whistling at her. That evening, a group of white men stormed into the house where Emmett was staying, pulled him from his bed, and he was never seen alive again. Emmett's family was part of the great migration of black people from the Deep South, moving north to Detroit, St. Louis, and Chicago, which is where Emmett grew up. His uncle had stayed in the South, and it was decided that Emmett would spend the summer with his uncle and cousins, learning the ways of the country, fishing and minding your manners. He was a good boy who dressed fine and cared about his appearance. He probably liked to show off his city ways to his country cousins. But he was a lovely, kind child with a slight stutter that he was working to improve. Now, no one knows exactly what happened in that shop between Emmett and that white woman, but all it took was the whiff of an accusation, even against a child, that he had crossed the boundary of deference to whites in all things. That was enough to get him killed. Brutally, horribly. He must have been so afraid, confused, wondering what on earth he had done to be treated this way. And no one could save him. Last year, around this time, Dale and I traveled to Mississippi to visit with our friends, Gail and Pat. You'll meet Gail in a couple of weeks when she preaches here. Gail and Pat live in the liberal enclave of Oxford, Mississippi, a college town not so different from Brunswick, Maine. But we left that liberal oasis to travel to the Delta, the Mississippi Delta, to see the places associated with Emmett Till's death. Before the Civil War, Mississippi was the richest state in the Union. The richest because of, well, the rich soil of the Delta, the fields and fields of cotton planted and tended and harvested by unpaid labor. Enslaved people made Mississippi rich. And when the war ended, the Civil War, and the enslaved people were now free, Mississippi began to falter. And it is now the poorest state in the Union. The town of Tutwiler, Mississippi, was once a thriving railroad town, but now it is strewn with boarded-up buildings which look abandoned but may actually be occupied. The biggest employer in town is the prison. And this is where asylum seekers, people seeking asylum in the U.S., are detained in this prison. From all the U.S. southern borders, men seeking asylum are separated from their families and brought to institutions like this one. Seeking freedom from persecution in their home country, they come here and are immediately imprisoned. Gail volunteers at this prison, or she did before COVID struck, visiting detainees, trying to offer hope, a kind word, some information about the process of gaining asylum. But really, she works with these folks to let them know that they are not forgotten. Now, we traveled to Tutwiler, Mississippi, because that is where the funeral home was, where Emmett Till's body was embalmed. No autopsy was performed until much later, 2005, when his body was exhumed so it could be autopsied. 50 years after his death, 50 years before a serious investigation into his death was undertaken. The funeral home itself is mostly rubble. Just a plaque lets us know that this is an important place in U.S. history. Next, we traveled to Sumner, Mississippi, just a few miles from Tutwiler, but a world apart. It's where the courthouse is. It, too, the courthouse, had fallen into disrepair, but funds were raised to restore it to how it was in 1955. Cases are tried there still, and it is possible to walk around and see where the trial took place, which we did when we visited there last year. The trial, Emmett Till's murder trial, lasted 5 days, and probably only lasted that long because civil rights activists like Medgar Evers found evidence and passed it along to the prosecutor. The trial of Emmett Till's murderers was the first time, at least the first time in the South, that a black man stood in open court and identified a white man as a perpetrator of a crime. Hedar, he said, when asked if he saw anyone in the courtroom who had taken Emmett out of his home that night. Simeon Wright testified that he saw the accused men take Emmett from his home. And then Mr. Wright got out of Mississippi, left the courthouse and just left Mississippi, settling in Chicago, where by all accounts he never recovered from the trauma of losing his nephew, entrusted into his care in such a brutal and horrific way. After deliberating for just 67 minutes, including time to drink a Coca-Cola, the all-white jury acquitted the two men. After walking around the courthouse, we drove further into the country to the Tallahatchie River, where Emmett Till's body was found. This is where plaques have been getting shot up. You may have heard about this in the news. We arrived just a few days after a brand new bulletproof sign was installed with cameras all around. After laying some flowers at the plaque, we walked in silence to the river, to the spot where Emmett Till was found. A beautiful place, and yet a place where such evil had happened. It is some comfort to know that Emmett ended up in a place of such beauty. We stood there for a while and prayed. Friends, for many of us, I would think for most black folks, and certainly for this white woman, it is not difficult to draw a straight line from the abuses of slavery to the cruelty of lynching to the murder of Emmett Till and onward to the continued abuse and murder of black bodies, especially of black male bodies. How many of you can say where you were on September 11th, 2001, and you heard about the planes hitting the World Trade Center and the Pentagon? And those of you who are alive at the time of the assassination of President Kennedy likely remember when you first learned of his death. Maybe you remember the Challenger shuttle explosion or President Nixon resigning. Important, shared memories. How many of you remember when you first learned of the death of Emmett Till? He was murdered on August 28, 1955, so many of us were not alive then. But when did you first learn about this horrible kidnapping and murder? I don't remember. I don't remember when I first heard of this. I'm sure it must have been taught in my history classes in high school, but I don't remember learning about it then or thinking about it at all until much later in my life. That not knowing or not remembering such a terrible thing is a privilege. It's a part of white, unearned privilege. I didn't know. I bet the black folks in our lives and all over this land remember only too well when they first learned of the death of Emmett Till. I was thinking about that boy. I was thinking about what they did to Emmett Till, said Rosa Parks. So on this All Souls Day, let us remember the loved ones we have lost. Let us speak their names and bring them close. But let us also remember the many black and brown people, most of them unknown to us. And isn't that, in fact, a source of the problem? It is easier to fear those you don't know, easier to ignore the pleas of those you don't know, easier to remain silent. But let us be silent no longer. Let us speak the names of all those beloveds, from Emmett Till to Trayvon Martin, from Medgar Evers to Martin Luther King, from Rodney King to George Floyd, from Sandra Bland to Breonna Taylor, and so many others. Too many. Black lives matter. Black deaths matter. Black souls matter. May it be so.
Flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars? I know the truth, it liveth. What though the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. since love prevails in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep?
The other evening, I had the pleasure of listening to some music in honor of the Living Legacy Project. This is a UU-sponsored project that takes people to the civil rights sites. It's a pilgrimage that is taken yearly. And of course, now it's all virtual, but it is an important program that brings people to the sites where such important history was made. And there were singers, many of which you probably know. Reggie Harris and Greg Greenway were there, and Issei Barnwell, amazing singer and composer and one of the founders of Sweet Honey in the Rock. And another singer whom I only encountered about a year ago, Melanie DeMore. She's on the West Coast. And she didn't sing this particular song, which I truly love. And so I thought I would offer it for our closing words. I am sending you light. I am sending you light to hold you, to heal you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. I am sending you light to hold you, to heal you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. I'll walk the path with you. Go slow, dear one, don't hurry. I'll go just like you need to go. There is no need to worry, 'cause I am sending you light to hold you, to heal you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. I am sending you light to hold you, to heal you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. Peace and love to you, dear ones.